The following edition of Connecticut Valley Views is made possible by Windsor Federal Savings, with offices in Windsor, Granby, and Bloomfield. Neighbors helping neighbors since 1936. I'm Susan Regan, your host for Connecticut Valley Views, and today our subject, a very important one, domestic violence. And I am here at the Interval House West, which is in the Farmington Valley, and I am going to be speaking with Robin, who is the Community Relations Coordinator, and Shanthi, who is the coordinator of specifically Interval House West. It's a pleasure to be here, ladies.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, background of the Interval House, I believe it was started, Robin, in 1977?
Well, it started a little before that. That's when we were founded. But originally it was groups of concerned women in the community who were seeing other women going through abusive relationships, and they started support groups and hotlines out of their own houses. And then in 1977, we opened our doors, and we've been here for 35 years now. So I'm very proud of our history.
And there was one woman in particular who I think drove the whole idea, was it not?
Well, there were
From her
several
experience?
groups. Our executive director, Cecile Enrico, actually was part of one of the original support groups, Woman Share, and they actually joined with two other groups to form Interval House.
All right. Now, how many locations within Connecticut are there?
We have 3 offices, our main office, and then we have 2 satellite offices here in the Farmington Valley and then one east of the river.
All right. And how many people would you help over, say, a period of a year with those 3 locations, roughly speaking?
Last year we helped over 8,500 victims, and we've actually helped over 164,000 since we opened our doors 35 years ago.
Wow. So we're actually saying people who have come through the door
Mm-hmm.
or have, now how do you get, obviously people come to you, but how else do you get references?
Well, we have court advocates who work directly in the criminal courts, and anytime there's a family violence arrest, they have access to those advocates if they're the victim in that arrest. So a lot of them, they get just funneled right to our victim advocates, and from there, if they need other services, they'll refer them to the hotline. But we work with a lot of agencies, social workers, doctors, the police refer a lot of people to us. They give them the hotline number and they get in contact with us.
All right. Now, how are you funded, Robin? You obviously, I would presume that you get a fair amount of money from the state, but where else would it come from?
A little less than half actually from state and federal municipalities. You know, we actually have 13% from the United Way, that we get 12% from private and public foundations, and we're very lucky that we have a very active community and development department, so 26% comes from just our own fund development.
All right. All right. Now, if people want to give, and we're going to give your website later on and give the hotline information, but if people want to give, there's a place to do that on the website?
Absolutely. You can do, it's very safe and secure right from our website, www.intervalhousect.org, and you'll see the Donate Now button right there on the homepage.
Well, one of the things I'd like to ask this of you, Shanthi, and I have a number of questions for you, but one of the things that I think is important is that we'd like to stress the confidentiality of the situation.
Yes.
Because
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very important that if a woman or a man or a child or whomever is involved in this victim situation
Mm-hmm.
knows that the information will be kept confidential. And perhaps you can just kind of talk to me about that, how that happens, how you're still able to help but able to keep things confidential.
Yeah, and the first time we get a call, we tell them all services are free and confidential, and also we make sure that they are safe in the situation, and sort of want to build their trust.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime they come into the office, all clients walk into the office, we say please keep this location confidential. We don't disclose this location to anyone for the safety of everybody involved, and that's how we carry it throughout their stay with us.
Mm-hmm. And if they need a place to stay or go, do you have places that you can send them, that if they don't have a sister or a mother or some other relative they can go to?
That's where we have a shelter that's, that has a hotline, 24-hour hotline, somebody on that is available for, call for 24/7. And then, we also have a shelter option that we provide for women and children, that they are able to go as an option for them if they don't have anywhere else
If
to
they don't have
go.
any place else to go.
Yeah.
All right, well then perhaps you can tell me when someone comes into the shelter, let's just say I called, I made the phone call, and then what would be and I say, my husband has just has hit me again, this is the 5th time, I don't have any family near me, I'm not sure how I'll get a ride to you, I need to see someone. Give me the process.
Basically, first time, the hotline receives a crisis call, they make an assessment as to whether the client is safe, and then, once they figure out that the person does not have any options or any place to go, then, they sort of have a plan for the client to come to the shelter.
Do you call the police and
Well,
send
that's
them
the
over there, or?
Well, it maybe Robin can, I'll let Robin
We would
answer
only
that.
contact the police if that is what they had wanted. If they do need to get help to come into the shelter, we do provide transportation to get to the shelter if they don't have another means of getting there. But certainly if they're at home and they're not safe and they're not able to leave safely and they tell us to call the police, we would be able to do that for them.
Okay. And then if you felt it was a true emergency, I guess you could call an ambulance. I mean, if you
Absolutely. If
felt they were,
they're
Yes.
or
we can tell that
911,
they're
I
being
guess.
harmed,
Yes.
their
All right.
safety is going to be.
So you kind of have an order of go. This is plan A, if it's this, and we do this, this, and this, and if it's B, we do this, this, and
Yes.
this, and if we don't done that. All right, now just a little bit of background. In order to become one, if a person was interested in helping with shelters in general, and not particularly this one, is there a particular background or educational degree that one needs to have to be in this line of, let's call it, worker assistance?
Well, we are looking for people who, have a genuine passion, but there's a 30-hour certification training for anyone who's going to do direct service, whether that is as staff or a volunteer, through any position. You would have to become certified under the state as a battered women's counselor.
Oh, okay, so there is a certification
Yes.
process. Okay, and obviously background checks and all those types of things.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Right. All right, let's talk a little bit about the stats, Robin. Did they break out of men, because I understand men can become victims as well, obviously children and women, and a kind of general age group, if you can give us a sense, let's say, of what's happened over the past year.
Last year, we had 78% of the victims who we worked with were female, so that leaves 22 over there for men. Generally, we see the age group of 25 to 50 being the largest number of callers. Over half come from that age group, but then we do get a lot of calls from the 20 to 24 range, and then also above 50 we do get several calls, but the bulk of it is between 25 and 45.
Do you feel that it has changed, or do you feel that economic times drive you? They're worried about money, or people are out of jobs, or there's more argument and reason for causing the violence? I mean, do you feel that there are driving factors to the situation, or is it just simply a matter of people living within the same facility?
Well, we know that
no longer get along.
that domestic violence is, occurs because one person is trying to get power and control. But certainly, if there is more tension in the house due to something economic, or someone has lost their job, that tension can sort of exacerbate the situation. But whether or not the economy is good, we know that domestic violence continues to happen.
So domestic violence. Let's just talk about something here. The effects of domestic violence, not only on the person to whom it's happening, but on children. I guess I'm going to ask both of you that. What obviously the child won't do well in school, but what other things happen to a child? Obviously it might drive them, I would think, perhaps later in life to reflect some of these experiences, or perhaps not interact with friends properly, or in the case of male or female, not interact well as they grow up through puberty to dating and so forth. I mean, I'm sure I've touched on some things, but what are some other things?
Well, the immediate impact we see is that 50% of children living in a house where there's domestic violence are also abused themselves. So we see them experiencing abuse. We also see more injuries. So they might try to protect the parent who's being hurt, and they can get hurt themselves. Or if there's a lot of chaos in the house, you know, if they are moving from their house to a shelter or with a relative, their lives can be just uprooted. You know, they might be actually used as a pawn. You know, they can be manipulated by that abusive parent to hurt the other parent, which can be just very confusing for the child.
Right.
And so then we see them, yes, having trouble concentrating in school. You know, maybe they're worried, when I go home, is it going to be calm, or is there going to be violence? They don't know.
So they can't focus on schoolwork or participate in sports.
You know, their brain is right back at home with that parent they're afraid for even. So, you know, we see them having somatic symptoms. So, you know, children are always having headaches or stomach aches that aren't explained because they maybe don't know how to share those emotions. So they start having those responses. And certainly as they get older, we know that if you don't have a good model of what a healthy relationship is, those warning signs, you know, aren't going to show up as quickly. You know, you might think, you know, that being, you know, with someone who is very possessive, it's a good thing. You know, they really love me. They want to be with me all the time. They don't want other people to see me. It's a sign of love. And if that's what you're used to, it can happen again. And unfortunately, we know that 72% of male abusers actually witnessed or experienced domestic violence as children. So we see these children growing up to not only be battered, but to perpetrate domestic violence as well. Which
It becomes the norm.
It does.
It's an accepted
That's
way
the
of
way
doing
that you
things.
deal with a relationship. And we see these children having trouble expressing emotions because they might be afraid to show anger because when they see anger, it's so scary and it's so bad. Or they might be afraid to show weakness because in their house, if you're weak, you get hurt. So they might be always aggressive. So we see them, they really have trouble understanding their own emotions, and that really affects their relationship with other people. And, you know, when you're growing up in that household, you learn to survive in that household. And some of those things they learn just aren't helpful when they go out into the real world.
Right.
Well, you mentioned the words warning signs. So in a relationship, let's call it an intimate partner, is that I believe you term that you use, so whether married or unmarried, but living together or at least in close relationship, there are warning signs. You said sometimes you feel as though it's a compliment. Someone doesn't want someone else to, you know, see you or talk to you or whatever. But the warning signs, teachers at school saying the child who used to do well at work, not doing their homework anymore, or not eating their lunch, or not participating in a sport, or generally depressed. So teachers can notice the warning signs. Obviously, a doctor having to examine a child that's brought into the hospital, or a primary care physician, or a pediatrician, notice bruises that don't normally go along with the usual falling down and playing soccer type thing. But how does it start out? It starts out, as you said, a control factor. So that is an emotional thing. There's this separating the person away from their friends and their family, and then it escalates from there. But if someone were watching this program now and they're saying, I don't know, I mean, is this a warning sign or is there not? I mean, where is the real red flag? When do you go, this is not just Harry saying, you know, being very possessive about me, he really loves me, but what would be, beyond hitting, what would be an emotional sign that would reflect, you'd say, you know, I think I better see someone about this?
And when we talk about warning signs, lots of things can happen in a relationship, but when you look at is it or is it not abusive, it's really about what was the intention and how did it make you feel. And I know you have some warning signs that you talk to people about.
Yeah, a lot of times, you know, we notice that, you know, they're being isolated, the family is being isolated. For children, you know, it's hard for the children to bring friends over, they don't want to have anybody over in their house, and for the victim, it's, you know, just total isolation, and they're afraid to go share whatever is going on for, you know, reason of shame, or people might not believe them. And some of the other things are also red flags that one would notice is, you know, that they
Financially, I would think.
Finance
Cutting
is, I
you
was going to
off,
say,
I'm not going to let
absolutely.
you use the, you know, the credit card anymore.
And that is a big piece we see in this area, is the financial abuse, that a lot of women victims sort of tend to stay due to financial, you know, lack of financial resources. So they tend to stay in the relationship and, you know, just sort of stay, you know, go along with the abuse that happens. And a lot of times it's also the emotional abuse and the mental and the emotional abuse that, you know, clients witness in this area more of
Well, that's
that.
why I asked the question, because there could be some people out there that feel kind of borderline, if you will, that feel as though, do I have a situation that's something I can deal with, or where should I, where can I go, what should I do before I need to go to a shelter, who should I talk to? And in some cases, people would talk to perhaps to someone in their church, might be,
Right.
if they don't have a friend to talk to. But I would say probably, that's just my observation, it feels to me that once they seem to be separating you from other people, that tells you they're hurting you off in order to perpetrate a situation so that nobody else knows.
And that's why the isolation is so important,
Mhm.
because if you had that support system, you would go to them.
Right.
But often when you're isolated, you stay because there's no way to leave.
Mm.
Or you're afraid because not only have they threatened you, but they've threatened to hurt your family, hurt your
Mhm.
friends. So you feel like if you get them involved, you're putting them in
You're
danger
putting them at
as
risk.
well.
Risk too.
Yes.
So it
yes.
can be very difficult.
Yeah.
Well, now, how can one help Interval House? How can it become involved? I think we talked about if you eventually wanted to become a series as a certification. But how else can people help with a domestic violence thing? If you see a neighbor and you think there's something, people tend to not want to get involved. People also feel as though it's an invasion of people's privacy if you hear a lot of yelling from a neighbor's house next door. But if you hear it on a repeat thing, or perhaps you notice the husband and the wife are drinking a lot and it's kind of a reoccurrence and so forth, should one call it to this hotline that we're going to give, or what would your suggestions or recommendations be?
Well, we use the phrase listen, learn, lend a hand, and lead. So listening is important without being judgmental. So, instead of maybe using a phrase like, why would you let them do that to you? You really build them up, validate them, validate their experiences, let them know you believe them, that it's actually happening. Learning can be learning those warning signs so that you can recognize it, learning about Interval House, learning the hotline number, how to refer someone, learning about the services. So instead of just saying, here, there's a hotline, you can say, they can help you with these things. Lend a hand. That can be as easy as, maybe you're going to babysit while she maybe tries out a support group to see if that's something she wants to do. Or it can be, maybe you have a signal, a code word, a text message that if that happens, okay, I'm going to call the police. You've used that code word. And when we talk about lead, it's taking it a step further. Maybe that would be volunteering to speak about domestic violence, maybe at your church or any clubs you're involved in. But if you really want to help Interval House, we take monetary donations, in-kind donations. So we're always in need of things for the shelter, such as pillows and towels and, toys for children, because the children stay in the shelter too. And volunteering could be direct service, or it could be, getting a group of people out to come, repaint a room or clean something, or doing a donation drive. So, and again, our website has all sorts of different ideas of what other people have done in the past to help. But the best thing you can do is if you see domestic violence happening, let them know that Interval House is there and they can help.
Well, I want to ask another question, Rob, and I think it's important we bring this up. It's a little bit of a pushback, but I think that in relationships, because times have changed, we have the internet, we have the computer, where people can get involved in chat rooms and create more drama in their lives than may be necessary. And I want to bring up the question, should we, as women, because the three of us are women, also consider the fact, is there anything that we do to contribute towards, encourage, or escalate a situation that might not move to the point of causing domestic violence? And I'll try and reword it so it's a good question. When we know that a man has a certain boiling point or a certain issue, he doesn't like you to wear that dress, or wishes he wouldn't talk to that same pool boy every time he comes over, or whatever that may be, and he's asked you to not do that, could you please, whatever, or could you not, whatever, and the woman pushes ahead, wants to show her independence, wants to show that she's in charge, that she can run her own life, and she's not going to do exactly as her husband says. Do you feel that there is some concern that that can create a situation and in a way almost make the man become the victim too? Make him look like a bad guy when all he was really trying to do was express his opinion about something. Do you feel that that happens or not?
Well, when we talk about domestic violence, we really are looking at relationships where one partner is always trying to get power and control over the other partner. So there might be a certain issue in a relationship that is maybe always starts an argument, but when that behavior crosses the line to being abuse, that's when you have to take ownership of it. So there might have been a reason for the fight, but if you escalate it to the point where it's abusive, then that's when it's not okay. And we always tell victims.
And then you go to marriage counselors.
And you work on those issues. But we want victims to know that it's not their fault, that they can't control that abuse. If it is domestic violence, then even if you did wear something that the person didn't like, there's still no reason for you to be abused. And oftentimes someone who's abusive will give excuses and even will believe that it happened because she pushed that same old button. But we know that abuse of any form is
He has become
not
very
right.
defensive. Yes.
Right.
Please
Right.
don't get mad at him. I think we saw that in the movie The Godfather. And when the brother Sonny came to rescue his sister, and he found out she was pregnant, and her face was battered and bruised, and she pleaded with him, "Please, please, please, don't do it. It's not his fault. I aggravated him," and so forth.
And it's
so-
usually not a one-time incident. There is something that has happened before that sort of, leads to the escalation. It's not, we cannot tell it's just because it happened one time. There's something that's building up.
And the victim, I believe you told me that before we started our show, you told me that the victim will do everything they can to avoid that situation.
Absolutely.
Right.
They see the pool boy coming, they don't want to talk to him because they know their husband is going to be mad, so they hide in the house.
And that's where that control piece comes in. After you've been in this relationship for a long time, you know what's going to start that fight. So much of your life becomes about not building that tension. And that's when we see the person doesn't have to stand over them and tell them what to do, because it's in their head. They know, when I get up, I'm not going to wear that. I'm not going to go through with the checkout line if there's a male cashier. They learn these things that are going to start violence, and they avoid them. So in that way, even if the abuser isn't there, they still have control over everything they're doing, because this person is so afraid that the violence is going to happen again that they do whatever they can to keep things calm.
Particularly when it comes to the children too.
Absolutely.
They don't
Very
want anything to do
Yes.
with come with the children. All right, now bullying is a big issue in our society today. That's one of the social ills that we have going on, and it's escalated by the internet and kids at school becoming very aggressive, one wanting to dominate over the other, and perhaps it's a reflection of what they've seen at home. So they see that a person who's in control is one who bullies the other person to the situation, and maybe that's part of the piece, and when that person grows up, they have that repeat performance, if you will. But bullying at school is kind of reflective. Maybe that's another warning sign, too.
Yeah, and absolutely. If they're aggressive with anybody, even if it's not someone of the opposite sex, that's something to look into. Where are they seeing this? Why do they think it's okay to, be abusive towards somebody else, whether it's a partner or just somebody else in the school? And especially with young children, that's a time to intervene and find out what's going on.
Do you see, now that we have marriage between same-sex partners, have you ever run into that situation?
We work with plenty of people who are in same-sex relationships. We know domestic violence can happen in any relationship. The same way a man can be abused by a woman, there can be abuse between male partners and female partners, and the services are all the same. We offer counseling, safety planning, anything that we would offer to a heterosexual couple, we offer to same-sex couples.
All right, so when they come to you, and let's say that you've put them in a safe spot, they didn't have a sister, didn't have a relative, didn't have a place to go, and let's say they have one child, and so now they're there for, what would be the period of time one might stay there, and what would be the next steps for a woman who's perhaps been married to this man for 5 years, and this has happened a number of times, and it's been reported to the police, and they're well aware of him, but they don't have anything on him to arrest him until they find him in the actual act. What would be the next step for this woman after she's been in the safe place? Then what? I mean, do you send them on to some other people to help them? Do you say, what would be the next step?
And that really depends on what they want to do, what their resources are. And for some of them, it does mean starting completely over. So while they're with us, it's usually a 6 to 8 week stay. And then, depending on their situation, it could be a little longer, a little shorter. But if they are coming and they really need to start over, we'll help them find a job, get into school, if they need childcare. There are transitional housing programs that could be a year or two while they're continuing on this process. If they have other options, other relatives, certainly we can work with that. But while they're there, they're meeting, 2-3 times a week with advocates, working on what's the safe step that we can take next.
So there's really hold their hand and help them get through this crisis to whatever point they need till they find firm footing.
Absolutely.
As-
So
as
our crisis services aren't just counseling and safety planning, but we work with people in the shelter on all those concrete needs.
Right.
So it's kind of a witness protection program. Help them start a new life if that's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, and we see, a lot of families, needing help even after divorce and stuff. And we've had, continuing clients come and, seek support for a few years till they sort of, feel that, they're okay to be on their own. So
So I think a success story for you folks is when you've been able to avoid an actual death or homicide, and able to change that and change the life of the children, because it'd be terrible to think that everything has been set up and someone just didn't pay attention to the warning signs, someone didn't do the next step, someone didn't follow through on something, and the next thing you hear is that woman's dead. And someone could have helped or prevented or assisted. So you're doing a very fine service for people out there, and that's why we want to get the message out about Interval House. Now we have your website, which is www.intervalhousect.org. Do I have that correctly? And we want to give the hotline, that's 860-527-0550. So I do appreciate your time. We certainly hope we've helped some families out there, some individuals. We appreciate your service to the community and doing a very fine job and in your contribution.
Thank
So
you.
we appreciate it. And to all of our viewers out there, you can see all of our shows on our website at www.ctvalleyviews.com. This is Susan Regan thanking you for joining me and bringing proof to the people. Our thanks to Windsor Federal Savings for making this program possible. Neighbors helping neighbors since 1936.